So you've got a lot going on right now. You've got a brand new album about to be released, Catastrophic
hmm
Dreams. So I thought we could start by just having you kind of tell us a little bit about the album and how it came together.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really started during early 2020. The album took a really long time to make, and I've always written songs. I was in a band years ago that where I was the primary songwriter and singer of the band, and we had a manager that we worked with that I've maintained a long friendship with, even after no longer working with him officially. And he and I were talking, and he knew I was kicking around some new ideas, and he also knew that with things shutting down, I had a little more time on my hands, and he was kind of urging me to get in the studio and start, make this an album, not just recording songs, here and there. And mainly I'd been just demoing stuff. And so, I was feeling inspired. There was a lot going on in life, obviously with the pandemic and having two young kids at home and me being a producer and musician for a living. A lot of gigs were getting canceled. So a lot of uncertainty and, just you just reevaluating life, and that's inspired me. I always turn to music when I'm kind of sorting through whatever I'm going through. And so yeah, that's pretty much what started it. And I just really seized that opportunity and started working on the songs. The only, not really downside, but the thing that really made it take so long is one, I'm a bit of a perfectionist with my own material. It's, I produce a lot of other people's material, and it's easier for me to, I get attached to that stuff, but it's different when it's not my own, and I really wanted to keep working through these songs. And so we finally had most of it recorded, and my plan was to produce, engineer, and mix the record myself. And I had a few loose ends on some of the songs, and it had taken, at this point, it was the end of 2020, early 2021, I think. And I probably really started the recording process in the end of the first quarter of 2020. And I was talking to Andy Johnson, is the guy's name that managed me, and he really kind of worked as executive producer, I guess you could say, on this record, and helps facilitate a lot of things for me. Um, I was talking to him and just kind of sort of half joking. I was like, man, I would send this album to Tom Schick if I could, and Tom to mix it. And Tom is producer and engineer in Chicago. He works at Jeff Tweedy's studio of Wilco, and he does all Jeff's solo stuff and records all of the Wilco stuff. He's done Ryan Adams and the Cardinals, a lot of great records. And he was like, yeah, well, long shot, but you just work on finish mixing that record. And like 3 days later, he called me up and he was like, hey, I sent your record to Tom Schick. Didn't know that he had any connection with him, but he apparently had a loose connection, and he loves it. And at this point, Wilco was getting back out on tour, so he had the studio available where because Jeff works like 7 days a week in that studio. And when he's out on tour, that's when Tom gets to bring in other artists. And so he was like, let's schedule you a week to go to Chicago and mix the record with Tom. So that kind of lit a fire under me, and I finished the record and flew out to Chicago and hung out at Wilco's studio and mixed it. And that opened the door. Tom introduced me to Bob Ludwig, who obviously has mastered a lot of amazing records over the past almost half century. And he agreed to master the record. So it ended up being a really cool thing where had this great personnel on the back end. And leading up to that, and I'm sorry if I'm being long-winded, leading up to that is, me, my best buddies who were in my band, we did the core of the recording, but I also had wanted to collaborate with people outside of my network of just in-town musicians. So, and given that a lot was shut down and it was hard to kind of travel and all that stuff, I was sending files and doing some remote recording with other artists. I got a girl named Carly Tate from Asheville to sing some stuff. Michael Flynn, he was in the band Slow Runner. He sang on it. Jackson Smith, Patti Smith, the singer, that's her son, and he plays guitar in her band. And he played a lot of the guitar on the record. Greg Camp, the guy that played guitar and wrote all the songs in Smash Mouth, he actually drove his RV to Charlotte, and we wrote a song together for the record. I got Charlotte Symphony members and some horn players from from the NPG, Prince's old horn section that happened to be local. It was just a really cool thing where I just got all these great people involved in the record. And so, yeah, I mean, and then I finished it, and here I am, an independent artist, and the struggle has been, because those were all just connections and friendships, people doing favors and those sort of
Sure.
things. And now there's like, how do you get it out into the world in this new, this new climate that the music is, music is being released in these days. And, the last time I was really actively putting records out, I was in a band called The Noises 10. We were signed to Jive Records and Warner Chappell for a little while. And it was before all that stuff. And so it's just taken some adjusting for me. But yeah, now I'm just trying to push out and, try to work on some marketing and all that kind of stuff to get it out to the world.
You can
That was
mention
a
that.
very long-winded, but full summary.
It was very good, though. You had mentioned, self-producing the record, and you originally wanted to mix and all that stuff. And I know you produce for a lot of other musicians. So what were some of the biggest challenges and some of the biggest advantages when you're producing your own music versus, an outside musician?
Well, the challenges are just my attachment to the songs as the writer. I get to be the objective ear and the objective input creatively. I work with bands, but I primarily work with singer-songwriters who come in and they might play guitar and sing, and they want to bring me on to help with some of the writing. But a lot of it is just imagining the instrumentation and the arrangements to turn these songs into a production, with drums and full instrumentation, whatever it may be. And so I kind of join a band temporarily, and essentially, I join an artist temporarily, and then I move on. And I might have long lasting relationships with those artists where they come back for, future records after that. But it's something I can compartmentalize in a way. I focus on that project, and then I shift focus to something else. When it's my own music, I'm definitely my own worst critic. So just letting go and saying, okay, this is done, was the hardest part of the process. But there were a lot of perks too. I work in a recording studio, so the recording process became a part of my writing process. If I had a new song that was very loosely arranged at this point, maybe just I wrote a chorus and some chord changes, but I didn't have it all worked out, I could go lay that down in the studio, record it, and live with that for a couple of days, listen to it, and that would aid in the process. And then maybe I'd bring my drummer in and we'd add drums to it, and we'd live with that for a little bit. And then, wow, how would it sound for this to be on it? And so it was really an advantage. But yeah, I mean, in the past, I've worked with other producers on my records, and I did that intentionally, just because it took a little bit of control out of my hands, which was good for me. But at this point in my career and in my life, I thought, man, it's about time I trusted myself to produce my own material and give just go through that process, and the discipline of it, and just the willingness to let things go and let things live as they are. I had to kind of remember these are like photographs of where I am at this point, and even now the songs have evolved as I play them live with my band, but that's okay, because what they were and the moment that we recorded them is still something special and different, unique.
Right. Awesome. Now,
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the album. There's just a lot of touches of so many different things. You've got so many different influences across genres. You've got rock and folk and Americana and pop and all kinds of things. I was going to ask you, what was it about the title track that made you choose that for the title of the album?
Yeah. Well, that's a song that came about midway through the record, and it was really a song that sort of encapsulated where I was as far as my headspace at that point. For whatever reason, that I mean, it's sort of it's telling a story that's a true story. I mean, essentially, I have these crazy catastrophic dreams I have my whole life, and a lot of times, just as I look back and I evaluate where I am in terms of emotionally or mentally, at any given point, there's probably some correlation between those types of dreams and anxiety and stresses that I'm carrying. And I was full of that during this time. You know, like I said, it was just an uncertain time. My kids were pulled out of school. You know, I've got two young children, and I do fairly well making music for a living. You know, in the recording studio, and but all of a sudden that stops. So there's no. I'm self-employed. There's no vacation time or anything like that. It's
Right,
just like
right. I get
income.
that.
Just yeah. And so it was this, and early on there was it ended up being actually a pretty cool thing what happened with music and art during the pandemic, where you know people, I think a lot of people who are always on the move, who are always, you know, just participating in the hustle and bustle of life, they don't have time, especially as you get older and you have children and you have careers. You don't have the time that you had in your 20s to enjoy music and art the way you once did, because it's just you have to create time for that intentionally. And now everybody was like in their kitchens as families more, or just around the house doing, finding projects to do, or whatever. And obviously you saw the uptick of live streams and things of that nature, and these in studio live performances by artists who were, you know, sort of still able to access things like that. And I feel like, you know, and even Andy, the guy that I mentioned before, he was doing this really cool thing where he was listening to an album a week, and but an album that had some sort of importance to him from his past, and he was re-listening to it and he started a blog essentially where he was just like writing this beautiful stuff about how it impacted him then, and how listening now was bringing him back, and the nostalgia of all that. And but before I saw that, I didn't know how I was going to find my way. And um it and the uncertainty of COVID and not knowing what was happening with that in a global pandemic, I just had a lot of fear and anxiety, and was there were a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of nights waking from these dreams. And it was just one night I got up and I was like, shit, what is going on in my head with all this? And I had a piano downstairs at the house and just went down and started playing it. And it felt like it really, and also aesthetically, just, and sonically, what's happening with that song um, best captured the feel of the record that I wanted, that I was aspiring towards. I wanted something that, while it was produced and well thought out and intentional, it also had a lot of looseness. And if you listen closely to that song, there's a lot of just ambient sounds, and there's a sweet simple piano part, and everything, and there's the strings, but there's a lot of just, there's like a bed of chaos underneath it that I wanted to create. And I felt like I really did a good job with that song of capturing it. And I like the title too.
It is a good title.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is a good song title. So in addition to the album coming out, you've got some shows coming up too, which thank God they're back. That's all I can say
Yeah,
about that.
absolutely.
But you've got a solo show at the Evening Muse next week on the 25th, and then a full band show at Petra's on February 17th. So
That's
tell
correct.
us
Yeah.
a little bit about what we can expect if we come out to the shows.
Absolutely. So at the Muse on the 25th, I'm going to be performing with Carly Tate. She's the Nashville singer-songwriter who I mentioned earlier I collaborated with on this record. She offered some vocals on a couple of songs, and she's just an artist that I've admired for years. And actually, in about 2016, I put a band together and recorded a record in Detroit that didn't. It took several years for that record to get released, but she joined the band as a backup singer, and we just, you know, just have a mutual respect for one another as songwriters. And so we decided several months ago to try to kind of work together on, she's putting a new record out soon, and you know, just tag team getting out and playing shows together and trade dates. And so I went to Asheville and we played at Pulp below the Orange Peel with her. I think it was in November, and we decided to do this in the round style thing where she'd do a song of her, two songs of hers, I would do two songs of mine, but we would lend whatever instrumentation or background vocals, anything we could, based on the material we know of one another's, from song to song. We told stories, and it was a really cool, intimate experience. And you know, a bunch of people came out, and so in addition to the live band shows that I'm doing, I wanted to focus on that because I feel like the songs that on the new record, and a lot of my songs, can live as these very almost folky singer-songwriter songs, as well as the full band instrumentation. And and also, all the players in my band are full-time musicians, and they gig in other acts as well. And I wanted to find ways to make sure that I could still be active even when I can't be with my full band. So we're pursuing some more of those types of shows. So it should be a lot of fun, and it's a lot of storytelling and things like that. Um, and then with the full band show at Petra's, that's the day before my birthday, so we're going to make it a little birthday celebration.
Okay. Well, happy birthday.
And thank you. And so that's going to be a totally different thing. When we play with the band, we stretch songs out a little bit sometimes, allow for some improvisation. We try to, we rock. We try to bring as much energy as we can, and really there's it's like the album is the middle ground, and there's this one interpretation I can do on my own, and then there's this other interpretation I can do with the band, and it just becomes a whole new thing, and it should be a lot of fun. And Carly's actually going to open that show as well.
Okay.
And there's a local artist that was just added to the bill, and I can't think of her name right now, so I'll have to send that to you if you want me to, because
Okay,
she
sure.
just got added on yesterday. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we can come and see you at both shows and get a little bit of a different perspective on the songs and the music, because it would be
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a totally different thing. I'm trying to sort of market both concepts as a way to experience the music I'm creating.
awesome. Now, you have been a fixture around the Charlotte music scene for so many years. So I just wanted, as a last question here, what are your thoughts on the scene right now here in Charlotte?
Um, I see a lot of improvement in the Charlotte music scene. I've always struggled with it. You know, uh, I mentioned before I was in a band called the Noises 10. We were, we had two major label deals. We were recording in big studios in Los Angeles. We were doing all this stuff. I toured with Brandy Carlisle, and we would struggle to get a write up in the Creative Loafing, where we would, we could pack the Visualize Theater, um, and not really find other bands locally to create sort of that scene that I think a lot of towns do so well at creating. And I don't think that's all based on, it's not the artist's fault necessarily. I mean, it's Charlotte's a weird city. There's not like a central music hub. The university is way outside north of town, and then now there's a lot of growth now, which I think is great. But at the same time, there's not the same um, there's not the same desire to maintain historical architecture and things that make it feel like we value our culture and our history in this city. And I think that that kind of coincides with the fact that you don't see a lot of support for art. And so we struggled with that years ago. And now, I'm 42 years old, and I record all these young artists, and regional and local, artists from North Carolina and South Carolina, and I feel like I'm seeing new little scenes develop, which I really like. And I see things like, obviously Justin Fedor and those guys there was a festival in town recently, and that was great. And you've got the Charlotte Shout, and there are attempts to bring more emphasis on music and culture, and art. And it's just, I think the people of Charlotte need to work harder at supporting it. Just the
Absolutely.
it's when I played at Petra's a few months ago, and it was pretty cool. That Plaza Midwood's changed a lot, and but there were people walking around and that just heard music and came in. But you don't see that it's hard to find that at every venue. And that was one of the great things about playing in Asheville a few months back is, it's a town that supports art and music. And obviously it's a bit of a tourist location, and they come to town on a Friday night, and they're just looking for something to do, and what's happening, who's performing. And I don't know. I wish that people supported it more here, and I encourage people to, because there is a ton of talent. I mean, and I also encourage the newer, younger artists, and the people who've been around and are well established, to try to work together to establish scenes. Book shows together, and uh, trade dates. Do it. Whatever it can be. Like, just get creative, because it's without, I mean, that's how we get people, to come show up. It's like your little network of fans and this little band, they're that band's network of fans, and we come together and people learn about new artists. And so I think I'm seeing more of that, but we have a long way to go, I think. So
I agree with a lot of your thoughts on that. So the bottom
yeah,
line, whoever's watching this or listening, get to a show. Go out there
get
and
to a
hit up
show.
some of these venues and check it out,
Yeah,
because
they're
you will find that some of the best music is right outside your back door.
absolutely. I mean, there are great venues, there are great artists, great songwriters of all genres. There are great recording studios, visual artists. There's so much happening in this city that's a little bit under the radar, and we need to do what we can to push it to the surface and allow people to know it's there, and support it, be patrons of that stuff, so those artists can thrive.
Definitely. And we will definitely try to help
Hmm.
whatever we can.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you, setting up this Zoom call and chatting with me. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to the record, and it
Absolutely. It
means a
was my
lot. Yeah,
pleasure. It was my pleasure. Hopefully you'll, it'll do well for you, and we'll get some people out to these shows, and hopefully we'll get a chance to chat again when you drop some more new music.
I hope so. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much,
All
Jason.
right.